Thank you. Very nice to be here. Grazie a tutti. Vorrei parlare anche in italiano, ma è una sessione internazionale, quindi rimango a inglese, ma spero che ci saranno opportunità nel futuro. As was just said, I'm the Cities and Regions lead at the Doughnut Economics Action Lab. This is the small organization that was co-founded by Kate Raworth, the author of Doughnut Economics, and we exist for the purpose of supporting practitioners around the world that experiment with turning these ideas into practice in various ways. So I'm the person that supports and leads the work of local governments, municipalities of all scales, from small municipalities to towns and villages and bigger cities around the world that work with this ideas. But we're a team. Kind of the broader community of practice includes practitioners in communities, grassroots education, business, government, etc. I'll share a bit about what it means to bring the ideas of Doughnut economics into practice in a municipality, in the public sector, and what are some of the experiences from around the world, kind of the collective experiences and insights that you'll then get a chance to hear more in detail from the other panelists. So starting from the question, really, what does it mean for cities and regions to aim for the donut? It means, in simple terms, to be setting a new idea, a new long-term vision for what progress should look like in a place and what our purpose is as a municipality in achieving it. That the long-term compass for humanity and for each of our places is to meet the needs of all people within the ecological limits of the planet. But what does this vision mean at a more local scale? How does it translate into the scale of cities and places? And this is kind of the starting point in our invitation for cities and places that work with Doughnut economics, is to zoom in into their places by recognizing not only the ecological ceiling and the social foundation of the donut, but in adding in that the recognition that as much as we need to think about our local needs and local aspirations, we need to think about our global responsibilities and global impacts. We live in a very interconnected and globalized world, and we need to move beyond working only within the boundaries of our cities and recognize the impacts elsewhere and how this cascade into kind of planetary scale crisis. So the guiding question for setting this local vision is, how can our place become a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? And this big question is really four connected questions into what we call these four lenses. So if we have the social foundation and the ecological ceiling, and we add to that the local axis and the global axis, we get these four lenses. So we have the local social lens asking, how can all the people of our place thrive? How do we meet the needs of all people? What are the needs of all people in our place, looking at their access to water, to food, to energy, to equality, to political voice, to all the things we know that residents need for a healthy, safe, happy lives locally. That's the local social lens. And very often, the primary focus of public sector remains and has traditionally been in this lens. However, this is one of four through the lenses of Doughnut economics. The second one is the local ecological lens, asking, how can our place restore and regenerate local nature? So really, this is about looking at how each of our places is built on an ecosystem that was once healthy, that is still healthy and living in balance somewhere outside on the outskirts of our settlements, where water cycles, the air is clean, the biodiversity is thriving, untouched by the impact of human settlements. So how can we learn from nature and bring that into the ways we design, we plan, we build, so that we don't just limit our impacts and kind of reduce them to zero harm, but we actively regenerate and restore the living world that we've been damaging. Then we move into the global responsibilities. We ask, in the global ecological lens, how can our place respect the health of the whole planet? And this is about those planetary boundaries of the donut, climate change, but also biodiversity loss, ocean acidification, land use change, all these planetary systems that have impacts, that have limits, and that have impacts that cross regional and national boundaries. So even though our impacts are not immediately seen, they are felt by essentially all of humanity. So how can we recognize the planetary scale ecological impacts of our energy use, of our lifestyle, of our consumption and production locally across these planetary boundaries, and how can we integrate them into our planning and working? How can we make them visible? And the fourth lens, the most invisible one in public policy typically and in any work really, is how can our place respect the well-being of all people? And this is about recognizing the interconnections between our actions here with people in other regions from the world, whether it's the people that harvested and transported the food that we use, the materials that we build it, the raw materials that we build our electronics from. What are the impacts going way beyond our boundaries through the things that we consume, produce, build, use in our local places, through global supply chains, through various networks of impact? How can we start making this more visible and stop accepting that it is normal to remain blind to how much we depend on modern slavery for the materials in use, or what are the conditions of communities in other places, or what is the responsibility of local actions for conflicts elsewhere. So how can our place respect the well-being of all people? So these are the four lenses that become kind of the invitation for a new way of thinking about local places and visioning them, and they can be used and are being used as for opening new conversations and visions, but also for approaching data and measurements in new ways as well. So these four lenses that we have kind of available as a lot of workshops and tools and materials are also a kind of a data methodology that allows places to build their own donut portrait, we call it, which is this sort of image on the right, where you're really seeing, kind of answering the question, how are we doing right now? How are we doing right now here? And how are we doing right now in our impacts elsewhere? And it's a bit, it goes beyond kind of a visual data dashboard, because it's really about both looking holistically across social and ecological dimensions and themes and areas, choosing what matters where we are, so not using standardized indicators, but creating our own indicators relevant to our own situation, but then also not comparing this to last year or comparing this against our political agenda for 2030, but comparing this against the long-term compass of where we think we need to be. So if we're looking at, housing, our long-term goal through the lenses of donut economics, if we're looking at numbers of people being homeless, isn't to reduce housing homelessness by 10% by 2027. The long-term goal is for no people to be without homes. So we're trying to bring that long-term way of thinking into kind of the visioning really, and the way of thinking of places. So this is, let's say, a bit of the starting point and some of the offers of deal, but in the practice of cities, the reality of what's been happening in cities is a combination of the tools and methodologies and kind of offers we made, and the cities innovating, learning, experimenting, doing really their own thing, and learning from other cities. And right now we have a kind of a growing community of practice of over 50 local governments around the world, and many more that are yet to become visible on this map, from Dunedin in New Zealand to Mexico City to Nanaimo in Canada to Santiago in Colombia, Glasgow, Dublin, Grenoble, Barcelona, Copenhagen, many cities in Europe, still predominantly in Europe. And many of these cities are also kind of continuing to experiment really and go ahead and learn from one another through kind of the networks of learning and exchange that we are trying to convene. This is from last year's gathering in person of local governments from around the world working with donut economics. You can see Nathalie somewhere in that picture, and Ben's colleague and Jaime's colleagues as well are all there, part of this community. So how does it look like then, the practice in cities? Each city may be setting a similar long-term goal, but work in very different realities of policy, jurisdiction, finance, kind of political cycles, national debates, etc. So each city start where they can start with what they can start. Maybe it's one department that is working on one strategy where there's potential to experiment and innovate. Maybe it's a political leader that is bringing a new idea at that level, like Ben will share, no doubt. Maybe it's a civil servant working as part of the team and bringing the ideas at a scale of a project. And this is why the reality and the practice looks very different from place to place, because we don't have a preset guideline of this is what it means step by step to work with donut economics, but rather open up questions, give frameworks, give tools, and then um, uh, kind of the practice emerges. Studying and kind of gathering insights from 50 places around the world that have kind of in quite formal ways worked with these ideas over the past 5 years. That's when the first city started. We see kind of 5 main ways, and these are clusters of practice, let's say 5 main ways in which cities have engaged with these ideas: by using donut economics for data-based diagnostic and monitoring, by using it as a place-wide strategic compass, by using it for sector or project-specific visioning, using it in dialogue and co-creation and participation processes, or using it in impact assessment and decision making. And again, this is building an understanding of what's been done so far. This may look very differently in 5 years' time. And for most places, they start with one thing and then they work with different opportunities and bring out another thing and another thing and another thing as things go ahead. So I'm just going to give a glimpse of these different areas of practice, because then you'll get to hear very much more precise deep dives from individual places. Database diagnostic and monitoring are when places design their own variation of this portrait and use it in different ways. You'll see here Copenhagen and Brussels, Grenoble, Barcelona, and Mexico on this screen. Some places have started using this portrait as an annual sustainability monitor. So year by year, they track, and then this becomes a basis for decision making at a municipal level, prioritizing budgets, kind of negotiating between departments, identifying areas that are most in need of strategic intervention, etc. So having that whole picture for a cross silo discussion at a higher level in a council. Or for others, it has served as a basis for building partnership across coalitions in the city, identifying common challenges like they did in Barcelona. It was the basis of this citizen manifesto for a more sustainable Barcelona, jointly, which is a partnership of 2,000 organizations in the city, public and private, jointly taking action for sustainability. In other places, it's been the basis of citizen participation, kind of a lot of debates and action at different scales in a city. The other approach as a place-wide strategic compass is typically a more higher political decision to bring these ideas into a municipality. You'll see both Glasgow and Nanaimo here, and different places have taken different approach of essentially building in their own donut to set their own strategic direction as a municipality. So whether it's kind of a framework that unifies a lot of the different policies and strategies and serves as a common framework that all policies and strategies are working towards, are touching base upon, whether it's about redefining what are the sustainability long-term goals of a municipality and what are their areas of priority and action, or kind of a compass that pulls together all the different This is also IPO in Malaysia on the top right. It's kind of an action and strategy plan that brings together all other actions and strategy plan under one umbrella, kind of guided by these principles. Sector and project specific visioning is really about a lot of different, can be a lot of different things here. It's Brussels economic shifting strategy, it's our Amsterdam circular strategy, it's a new school in Tomelilla, or an urban plan in Thimphu in Bhutan. So many different types of strategies or projects where they've used Doughnut economics as a visioning tool or as an something that pulls out is a basis for building the principles for that strategy or for action. Dialogue and co-creation is also a very broad term to say a lot of people have been using it both internally as kind of a tool, holistic tool for opening up dialogue and co-creation between departments, but also externally with actors, with citizens. It's the holistic nature of it has lended itself to a lot of these participatory processes, bringing different voices from sociological, from social and ecological side, from activists and private sector and public sector. And finally, impact assessment and decision making is a specific thing that several places, including Grenoble, have started doing, where they develop a tool, a kind of a cross tool that is used across all departments in a municipality, that is essentially an impact assessment, a screening tool, where each project policy decision is assessed based on the potential negative or positive effect that project will have on all of these social and ecological areas. So really moving away from decision making based on cost value analysis, based on financial bottom line, and bringing the whole social and ecological picture. So I'm just gonna finish with these last few slides. We've also been learning that there are, of course, a lot of challenges that places have been facing when working with this new idea, mostly to securing a widespread support for a new idea. So in many places, you know, you'll have a department, few politicians that still work hard on building broader buying for doing this more progressive, more ambitious agendas, and that's never an easy or a fast process. There are challenges for those that work with data because they aim to work with creating new approaches to data that aren't as standardized and aren't as easily available as well. So and then some common challenges like political change and not enough time and resources, etc. But interestingly, the benefits that we've been learning from many places have been heavily been in the shifts in culture and ways of working within the public sector and in the municipality. So, and this is all early days. Cities, some of these cities and places have just started this work a year ago, 2 years ago. They're just developing new policies. So it's not always, it's too early to say, and all this impact on the ground happen. But big shifts on the ground need big shifts on the inside. And we've been hearing many places talking about the benefits that they've seen that are a cultural shift towards systems-based and integrated thinking and policy making, enhanced cross-departmental collaboration, so bridging across silos, actually departments collaborating and working in more integrated ways, and the fact that this has brought a new narrative that helps facilitate a new collective debate internally and externally. And yeah, I'll wrap up here actually, and I already shared these things. If you want to learn more about kind of the beyond the 3 cities you'll hear from today, you can check out our guide that has a lot of case studies and a lot of the details and links to that work, and reach out to us at Deal, who are here to kind of support and guide and connect with others doing the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Buongiorno a tutte e a tutti. Grazie per accogliermi oggi e per darmi la possibilità di raccontarvi come ho sviluppato il mio progetto a Grenoble. I will keep in English because I cannot actually speak Italian. So just a minute. So I'm Doughnut Economics project manager in Grenoble. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
No.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. No?
Now, yes, actually.
Okay, perfect. So everything started in 2022 when Grenoble was rewarded European Green Capital for its sustainable policies, as well as other various labels such as Territory Committed to Nature. And this year was quite decisive in the Council's commitment to take environmental action even further. The municipal team voted to launch the Grenoble 2040 political approach with the aim of offering children born in 2022 the opportunity to celebrate their 18th birthday in an ecological, safe, and socially just city and world in 2040. So this dynamic had three main objectives. First, linking social and environmental issues that can no longer be separated. Secondly, connecting local and global scales to take responsibility both as city administrator and political stakeholder. And finally, reconciling reason and emotions to imagine together new narratives of hopes based on a solid scientific foundation. So Grenoble 2040 is a global framework for the municipality to question and evaluate current public policies, to integrate and develop actions that are made locally, and for federating local stakeholders to anticipate future disruption and building together our future, and to provide a common framework for reflection and action towards a more distributive and regenerative economy. It was decided to rely on Doughnut economics, a delicious new recipe for building the future. We started in 2022 by establishing a transversal territorial diagnosis. You can see on the left side of the screen. It's a data portrait of place, and the aim was to know where we stand compared to targets, viability objectives, and sustainability thresholds. You can see in blue a comparison with the French national average for some of the indicators chosen. On the right side, you have the updated version we just published in April, with showing the evolution trends since 2022 on the main indicators. And you can see that the situation is quite improving on most of the indicators, except for some of them, among which the energy poverty mobility that can be explained also by the Ukrainian war and energy price raise. So after working on this data portrait, we started working on the main political strategies and plan with some Doughnut mapping. Here you have the example of the Air, Energy, Climate Action Plan. So the idea was to put on a Doughnut the dot where this plan is taking action, to see how transversal it is, if there are some dimensions that are not addressed by this plan, and how we can also develop and reinforce a cross-cutting approach with all of the municipalities department to local challenges. Other examples here with the municipal health plan, with the example of the Axe Living, and also the plan to promote socially and environmentally responsible purchasing, which is common to the whole municipality. So all of these gave us an overview of all of our strategies and all of the challenges we are facing and addressing. And the idea was also to connect and to connect the departments of the municipality. Then, to ensure that all of the municipal projects systematically take into account all of these challenges, we created an environmental and social analysis grid, also used as a decision-making tool for political and strategic management. So basically, this analysis grid is composed of two big parts. The first one is the environmental responsibility, with three axes regarding climate change and energy, biodiversity, ecosystems, and pollutions issues, resource management, and circularity. And on another side, the social responsibility of the municipality with the human health, social cohesion, and social justice. So this analysis grid, which impact criteria are based on the local political targets, aims to qualitatively assess the contribution of the projects to the various objectives. It has an originality which lies in its dual approach. So we are both focusing on the impact of the project on, by, and for the local authorities, assets, and staff, as well as the impacts on, by, and for the area and the population as a whole. You can see on screen, we developed a rating principle to quote the projects between -3 and +3 to assess the impacts of the project. The results from this analysis provides an overview of the project strength in green on the right side of the screen, and improvement axis in orange. And thanks to these results, we can then work on the project to improve their negative impacts and reinforce the positive ones. Beyond impact assessment and project monitoring, this tool is used for budgetary arbitration and project prioritization. And last but not least, Doughnut Economics is also a great opportunity to change our perspective through pedagogical and ludical visuals. So we open safe spaces for debate and discussions with citizens, such as this infographic on biodiversity loss or this poster on the environmental and social challenges facing mountain ecosystems. Here you have also some photos from an event we organize every 2 years in Grenoble, the Cities in Transition Biennale. And 2 years ago, we took advantage of this edition to invite Kate Travers and her team, so Leonora was also there, to meet with the mayor of Grenoble, Eric Piolle, but also to organize some citizen workshops working on a sensitive approach to immerse the participants into Doughnut Economics concept. Kate gave also her first lecture in French, so it was quite amazing, and she even made the public sing. And also a life-size Doughnut exhibition you can see at the bottom was set up for the occasion to allow visitors to immerse themselves in this concept. This year, we also benefit from this event, as we did in 2023, to invite some other European countries working on Doughnut Economics. And in 2025, so this year, we had the chance to welcome some new French cities that are starting working with Doughnut Economics. It's also the occasion for us, as many times as we meet, to make some workshops together to improve the existing methodologies and to work on new subjects, and also to share the work with other European networks such as ICLEI, etc., etc. And we also take advantage of the local events organized by the municipality, such as Christmas markets or some music festivals, to have some short animation with the general public, with quiz, with games. And every time the idea is to raise awareness, but also to introduce the concept of Doughnut as a new way of conceiving our everyday life. And to conclude, I just wanted to give you some learning and feedbacks from our 3 years experience in Grenoble. So as I just shortly explained, we are using Doughnut Economics on different levels with different kind of public, as a territorial diagnostic to have a vision of where we are and where we want to go, an analysis tool to measure how the municipality is implementing projects that can address or not such challenges, as a monitoring tool for decision making, political arbitration, budgetary decision, etc., but also as a way to discuss with the citizens on the territory. So Doughnut Economics is really a common transversal reference framework for us, but we of course had some challenges and are still we are still struggling with that. So Leonora already gave a global overview, but I would make the emphasis on three main limits. The first one is a political dimension. So I had the chance to benefit from a real political support. However, when you are choosing some data, some indicators, etc., it's always an arbitrary choice with a highly political dimension. Also, the fact that I'm working in the city of Grenoble and we are sharing some skills and competences with the metropolitan area. So when politically they are not that friend, it's quite complicated to implement a new project and new concepts. For the technical part, Doughnut Economics is really an opportunity to work on a 360 cross-cutting framework. However, inevitably, we have to simplify the reality that is complex when choosing one indicator to define the situation on the local level for a dimension that is larger than what we've chosen as a data. And also all the work with data faces a lot of challenges with the availability, non-existent data, incomplete, unsatisfactory. So it's always a work in progress, but the municipality services are always trying to get some more relevant data to complete the Doughnut Economics work. And last but not least, the operational dimension. First, it's a new concept, but in the municipality, as I'm sure in your places, we already have many other approaches. So it's a challenge also to just connect Doughnut Economics so that you're not just adding something else, but completing in a complementary way the existing frameworks. And also the challenge to acculturate the local authority staff so that all civil servants become ambassadors for Doughnut Economics and really change their practices introducing the concept. It's all for my sharings today. Do not hesitate to contact me if you have some question, and I put some also links if you want to know more about Grenoble 2040 approach, about our data portrait and data choices. Also, we published last year a report that recap all what I just said, and also a little video with the elected representatives who introduced at first Doughnut Economics within the municipality. Thank you very much for your attention.
So it's my absolute pleasure to be here. I like to take these opportunities, either me or usually somebody from my team, when we can actually share what we're doing in Glasgow and learn from what other people are doing. So what I want to do today is talk through what we're doing. The city-university partnership has been really important for us. We came together just ahead of the city hosting COP26 when there was a real focus on climate, and I'm actually a professor of environmental and climate science. And we came around this idea that despite what's happening at international levels in terms of these international negotiations, it's really cities that will drive and deliver the low carbon, climate resilient future that connects climate challenges to a just and equitable transition. So cities really are the driver for this kind of work. So this has been ongoing with the city since 2019, this partnership. And what we did back in 2020 is set up a set of dialogues where we had researchers, practitioners, and policymakers come together to really understand what challenges the city faced and what the complexity was around those. And that's really created the platform and the knowledge base for the ongoing work that we have. And what I want to do is take you through a project called Gallant, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in the next slides. But I want to take you through the vision for systems transformation that we have in the city. And then I also want to do a bit of a deep dive into what we've been doing to create the Thriving Glasgow portrait and how we've been determining what data sort of lies behind that. I'll talk a little bit about how some of those changes are happening in ways that we weren't necessarily expecting in the first place. And then I'll end on some reflections of the donut and inequalities as well. So the complexity of the challenges and the challenges that came out of those dialogues in 2020 allowed us to focus on some environmental areas over here that we have work packages around. So from flood risk to biodiversity, to what we do with vacant and derelict land, what we do in terms of active transport within the city, and also energy systems at the community scale. And we're working through these challenges through 3 work streams that focus on systems transformation, community collaboration, and data analytics. And I will really focus on the systems transformation piece today because we're using the Doughnut economics to really frame the systems work that we're doing. Got too many things in my hands. So the work that we've been doing to create the city portrait started back in 2022. We started with a desk-based mapping of the city's strategies and policies to the Doughnut economic dimensions. And then we had a full year of workshops, and we worked with communities and community groups. We held workshops with the civil servants, particularly during political re-elections when we weren't allowed to do things publicly because this is part of a political agenda. But we also did the workshops with elected officials, and we also then convened, which I think is similar to what you've done here today, public sector, private sector, third sector organizations across the city. So all of them have fed into what we've been doing within Glasgow. So that process has gotten us to a point where we have 44 dimensions defined across the city, and this comes from those workshops, so this is the shared vision. I've just highlighted the one there on food, so everyone in Glasgow has affordable access to nourishing and sustainable food. There's no food poverty and no need for food banks if we are actually thriving within the city. And you can see that what would that look like in Glasgow. This is a really important part of what we do with the portrait and creating the portrait, because this is what's meaningful within our place. So local community food growing and food sharing initiatives are widespread, and healthy food options are more accessible and affordable than ultra processed options. So this has been a really important process for us. And what we're doing now is trying to connect the different components of the Doughnut. So you can see here, this is an example for vacant and derelict land. Within our project, we're trying to regenerate vacant and derelict land using carbon sequestration. And you can see that there's both positive and negative interactions across different parts of the local and the global Doughnut. So we're trying to make more and more of these connections obvious in decision-making processes within the city. So you can openly access the portrait, the report, and the digital Doughnut online. There's a QR code there, and I'm happy for these slides to be shared afterwards if that's helpful. And that link shares all of the co-produced definitions, as well as where we're at so far with the data behind the Doughnut. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the processes that we're going through now. So I don't have nice images to show you as to whether we're in the Doughnut or exceeding the Doughnut parameters and dimensions and things like that. Perhaps it's because we're academics and we think a little bit too much about these things. But for us, the dream would be that completing this work, we can find all of the data sets that we want that help us detect where inequalities are happening, how they're changing over time, and they're very specific to, our neighborhoods and our place. The reality and the data that's easier to find is data that exists kind of at the national level that we can downscale per capita. But when we do that, we end up losing some of the place richness. And I would say that in terms of where we are at the moment, we're probably closer to the dream space when we're looking at the local dimensions of the donut. And we struggle a little bit with the global data and how we're actually going to connect that to our local actions in place. One of the things that's been really important is you uncover a lot of potential data sets that you can use in developing, whether you're having shortfalls, whether you're overshooting those ecological parameters. And what's been really important for us in making those choices is to make sure that we as researchers and academics are working very closely with the city. And so we co-developed with them through workshops this set of criteria for the indicators and the data that we're setting within the donut process. So all of this matrix here in terms of how we make decisions has come from co-production with the Glasgow City Council. And as we go into our kind of data portrait and we're trying to find the right data, it's basically a lot of research behind trying to find the relevant data sources. It's looking at what some of the other donut cities and donut places have been doing. And it's also doing local policy mapping and understanding what the city is already doing and what the gaps are. So one of the things that Gallant's been able to bring to this as a research project, we have a really large team of interdisciplinary researchers. Some of those researchers come from public health, and they're used to using these sort of mapping exercises to understand how things relate to each other. So here you can see a combination of some of the city's actions and strategies and policies, as well as some of the national plans, so the national planning framework here. And you can see all of the various strategies and actions and how they map onto the thriving definitions that were created within the city. Doing this work to bring it back to those definitions, this is kind of a visual. So in the local policy place, locally, the local ecological side of things, you can see the names of all of the different policies and plans that have indicators and are related to the indicators and definitions that have been chosen. You can also see in the local social space where those indicators and data exist. But you can see the elements that are circled there in red, and those are places where that mapping has suggested that we don't already have an existing indicator, we don't already have existing data that can help us measure what has come out that the place actually wants to see as us moving towards thriving. And again, we've been doing all this work for the city, so they've told us that it's been really helpful for them to understand these gaps, because they're at a point where they're revising the city development plan and they're revising the economic development plans. So they're taking these into account as they're making those decisions and deciding what they focus on. Again, there's a number, I think, of challenges and opportunities in this space. And again, we as academics may think about things maybe a little too much. But in terms of the global indicators, I think it is a bit more difficult to find things that are meaningful and definitely link into your place. So we'd love to learn more about how have different cities defined thresholds for deprivation and degradation. Are there areas where we need some sort of standardized or common framework? Things around consumption, degrowth, decolonization. How does the donut actually help us build indicators around those? We've had some difficulty when we reach out to businesses and private sector. How do we bring in investment? How do we, similar to climate finance sorts of discussions? And then narrative approaches seem to be really important, but how do we build those into decision-making a bit more? One of the things that has been a really nice opportunity for us is, although because I come from a climate and science background, and this was originally part of the legacy of the city hosting COP26, a lot of this initiative sat within the sustainability team within the city. But as we've been working, the Doughnut obviously stretches out across more and crosses over more different departments. So we're now working really closely with the economic development team, and we're trying to move away from some of the kinds of indicators that we see up here. And as we've been working with them, they've asked these questions to us. Are we measuring the right things? Is there a place for quantitative or qualitative data? And they're really interested in the narrative and the storylines. How do we reflect back to the people in the city what we're doing and actually give them a sense of what's happening in those spaces? And this is my final slide today, just reflecting on inequalities in the Doughnut, because that's kind of what this overall coming together was meant to represent. So I think there's a lot of things that the Doughnut does sort of implicitly. So it makes us think local to global. It automatically sort of frames us to think about the global inequalities when we're setting local policy and plans. There's specific dimensions that cover this. There's a number of things that are still challenging. Again, the meaningful indicators for how we link things that are happening locally to global. But I think there's a lot of opportunities as well. One of the next things we're trying to explore is how we get people, more diverse experts and people with different voices, like representatives from the Global South, to come together and help us build a consensus on what those indicators for that global dimension should be. So thank you.
Buongiorno a tutti. Thank you for having me here. My name is Ben Geselbracht. I'm a counselor with the city of Nanaimo. I just want to make sure that my screen that I've shared from my desktop is showing up on the big screen. Okay, great. So our city is in Canada on the west coast, and I'll advance the slide here. We've got a population of about 100,000 people, and you know, when we look at the Doughnut analysis of Canada, where it's very clear that we're an overshoot in many of the ecological dimensions, carbon dioxide emissions, release of land use, destruction of green space. We are definitely an overshoot, and same in the social dimensions. We have many struggles, and my city is not any different. In Nanaimo, we have about 6,000 people that are at risk of losing their home. And on our streets right now, it's very visible the amount of homelessness. We do a count every couple of years, and there's about 600 people that are living on the streets. And coupled with a toxic drug crisis, we are struggling with a very apparent issue of inequality. And for example, with our ecological overshoots, we are not on track for meeting our national greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and need to do a lot of work. And so that brings us to why Nanaimo has adopted a Doughnut economics framework for planning. We really saw that the framework provided a way to mobilize our community in making changes and enlisting the many powers and resources that the city municipality has at its fingertips. So the Doughnut economic framework, we found when we were every 10 years, our city does, and it's legislation for our entire province to do a 10-year community plan, which is all the community policies and land use policies for the city for the next 20 years. And we saw a large opportunity using the Doughnut economic framework to provide greater coherence to how we organize ourselves. Basically, what the Doughnut economic framework does when it's made downscaled to the level of the city is that it provides a vision for the city, but it also breaks that vision into actionable parts by creating measurable objectives that a key phrase we use is what gets measured gets managed. And so with key objectives and indicators, we can track what success looks like. If we're moving towards the goals that our city has outlined in terms of reducing homelessness, meeting our greenhouse gas emissions reduction, meeting waste reduction goals, providing affordable housing. All these different goals that we can lay out allows us to better manage our progress and integrate it into the city planning process. And that's what we decided to do. And so we were very inspired by the work that was done in Amsterdam with the Doughnut Economics Action Lab. And it was very organized and clear what goals Amsterdam was shooting for, and then how their planning process was organized behind that. And so this inspiration came during COVID in 2020. And in Canada and in our region, there was this desire for a period to build back better. So with the Amsterdam process and what the Doughnut Economics Lab put together was a very clear planning process that we could do in Nanaimo called Creating a City Portrait. And that's what our council decided to do in the middle. We were just started this process of doing our official community plan, this 10-year plan for how our city was going to develop and utilize the land and other associated policies around recreation, transportation, water management. And so we went and the motion that our city council put forward was that the city of Nanaimo adopt the Doughnut economic model as a cohesive vision for all city initiatives and planning processes, and that the city portrait for Nanaimo be created to scale down the Doughnut economics framework, and that the city portrait be blended with the Reimagine Nanaimo process, which is our city planning process, and that the appropriate measurable targets and indicators relevant to the community be identified and included in the framework to track progress. And why I chose to present exactly what our council directed our city to do is that it put all the pieces in place to set the vision, set the objectives, and then put in a monitoring key performance indicator strategy to know where we were. And so we went through as a city, and we were very grateful for the help of the Doughnut Economics Lab, asking the key planning questions when we're putting together the vision and our objectives for a city. What would it mean for the people of Nanaimo to thrive? And that's that local social lens. What would it mean for Nanaimo to thrive within its natural habitat, that local environmental lens? And what would it mean for Nanaimo to respect the health of the whole planet, taking a more global view outside of our borders? And then what would it mean for Nanaimo to respect the well-being of people worldwide? So this was over COVID, which made the planning process interesting. So a lot of it was done online initially, but we went through all our different planning documents in the city. And, cities love to do planning, and each department is siloed in its separate area. But what this process allowed was to put all of our planning documents on the table: our recreation plan, our water management plan, our sustainable community plan, our transportation plan, discuss it and put it all under one roof, integrated under one framework. And so we came up here. This is the look of what our unifying framework looked like for the city. We had five key areas. The outer circle for green Nanaimo, regenerative resilient ecosystems, and then four different components to represent the social foundations: a healthy Nanaimo, a connected Nanaimo, an empowered Nanaimo, and an enabled Nanaimo around transportation, diversity, culture, social integrity, and economic prosperity. And so in our framework, basically, under the five key areas, then we created specific policy objectives that contain the goals. And so under a green Nanaimo, we've got gas emission reduction, climate adaptation and hazard mitigation, urban tree canopy, healthy watersheds, solid waste. Another example, under healthy Nanaimo, we have objectives and goals around community safety and security, affordable housing, intergenerational living, food security, emergency management, recreation, culture. And each of these elements allows for the decision makers and policymakers to hold the big view of all the different elements we're trying to balance, and then integrate that in with our annual budgeting cycle. So here's how the larger framework integrates down into the policy areas, the objectives, and then right down into the actual land use planning. So different initiatives and policy areas that, you know, the Doughnut model inspired was a circular economy strategy. We had a strategy where we're renewing streets, that we ensure that we have good walking accessibility for people, in addition to bike lanes and trees on our roads. We made huge investments in our transportation system. We put in place sustainable procurement policies so that when we're purchasing, you know, the millions of dollars of materials and services in our community, we're looking at how those purchases perform environmentally in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, waste production, but also how they're being created in terms of you know, where in the world and what are the employment standards and conditions are. We're starting to value in our asset management our natural assets. So just like with a building, you look at the full cost cycle of roofs when it needs to be replaced. We're also looking at our watersheds or our marshes and how that's purifying, you know, rain runoff, and how that supports our water table, and putting a value in what we need to do to maintain these green spaces, or our trees, for example, that provide very important services to fresh air and shade. We also have made a lot of investments in creating an arm's length organization that deals with homelessness, and buying public property so that we can put affordable housing on it, as some examples. But we use our monitoring strategy to compare how different policies will work. This is an example of the different ways we could set up our city, and we measured how they performed against the different elements of our plan. But basically, our planning document, our city is organized around our city plan, which is the main 10-year document for where we'd like our city to go. Then there's actual integrated action plans that put into very specific actions within a short term, medium term, and long term, and then a monitoring strategy that, you know, we keep going back to our key performance indicators to see where we're at. So in the integrated action plans, for example, with affordable housing, we have basically our immediate program list of things that we want to do within a 1-year period. You know, one, identifying sites for acquisition and potential partnerships of affordable and supportive housing projects. Then we have items within a council term, which is 4 years. And these are all the different policy and actions that we want to implement within a 4-year period. And then there's a future program list. And we have this for each of the goal areas. And then at budget time, we basically review where we're at. So for example, you know, at budget time, we'll look, okay, prepare policies and bylaw amendments to expand secondary suites and coach houses to densify. And then council can see the report, okay, we're in progress, that's good, or if it's behind. And then we can reassess and either add things to the budget or take it away. And then also each year we go and review our monitoring strategy, which really is sort of the dashboard of how we're doing on those key performance indicators. And people in Nanaimo were a little leery about the term donut economics, and there was a backlash, and we like our conspiracy theories here in North America. So we changed it from a donut and we unraveled it to the Nanaimo bar. And for some reason, that's what we're known internationally as, is for this dessert treat, the Nanaimo bar. But people like to know it's what we're using is homegrown. So we have a variety of different key performance indicators, environmental aspects like community greenhouse gas emissions, the amount of per capita waste we produce. We also look at social aspects like our vacancy rate, housing affordability in terms of percent of income, 30% of income. We have measures around air quality, transportation related injuries, unemployment rate. And there's quite complicated in how you get a measure so that it can actually work as a key performance indicator, but it's important as a communication tool to the public, so that they can understand, how that indicator and that measure, where you're at on it. And that's an art form to get proper. And it also takes a lot of resources, as the earlier speaker mentioned. So it's a process to put them in place. But here's an example of how Nanaimo's operating, and we have overshoot in several areas. Basically, this process has really, the initial planning process was really useful for the city because it made all departments work across, and it broke down the silos when we broke down all those different city planning documents and put it under one roof. And we really saw a change in interdepartmental collaboration. We also have seen other external agencies in the community, like our Economic Development Prosperity Corporation, and our Chamber of Commerce, adopt the donut ideas, and now there's a lot more community buy-in into it as well. That's allowing us to, oh, there's my alarm for 15 minutes, allows us to broaden the community buy-in, which is really important. And the challenges that we faced was kind of funny. One was just during this time, there was a lot of fear around external forces controlling what's happening in Nanaimo. And so people had these conspiracy theories about the World Economic Forum controlling city council through the Donut Economic Lab. Like it was strange. So we kind of dropped language and just, I think it was really important to make it clear that the goals and objectives that we chose in Nanaimo were created by the community. And that is really important. So thank you very much. And yeah, good luck with the work that you're doing in Milan and broader.